All right, hey everyone, this is Steve coming to another video. This one's a little bit more in response, partly to just kind of how this week's gone for me and a little bit of how I felt. And then I think it's a topic that's really important, and I'm going to kind of hit on something probably a lot of people have felt at some point. And it's kind of this idea of worthiness. And for me, I've kind of shared this idea that I'm a little bit of a perfectionist. And so I think with that, there's really this strong desire to really try to work hard, strive, and kind of earn everything that ultimately I get or receive. And so with that, it's not like working hard isn't necessarily a bad thing in itself, but this bringing this into our relationship with God, I think is something that can get a little dicey pretty quick if we're not careful. And so for me, I've actually really struggled with this in my relationship with God, and just really feeling like I need to earn His love or in some way kind of prove my worthiness before I'll be accepted by God. And sometimes even in making these videos or sharing my faith with people, if I feel like I haven't had a good week, it could be as little as not reading my Bible, as in some way kind of feeling like I've fallen short, maybe in the maturity of my walk with the Lord, or even a sin pattern I've struggled with at different points in my life. Or in some ways, as I'm going to share something I've noticed this week that I've struggled with. And I probably won't go too deep into that this video. I'm going to make kind of a second one that ties a little bit into this, but still standalone. But just this idea of self-control. And then specifically this week, it's been around wasting time playing video games. I really just kind of felt a lot of shame around that. And believe it or not, that actually kind of challenged me quite a bit this week in my relationship with God and even wanting to make these videos. I think with that, it's important to share because I'm going to guess a lot of you also at some point maybe have struggled with this, whoever it is that's actually watching this video. And again, I think that's not something that we only see in the church. I think that's something secularly we struggle with too. And I think that's kind of the beautiful part. I think that's really a big part of the good news that we see in the story of Jesus and what He did for us. And so with that, I want to start off by sharing a verse. And instead of having this performance mindset, instead of having this earning mindset, we actually see something pretty different in the Bible that it talks about when it comes to our relationship with God. And it says, this is Ephesians chapter 2, starting in verse 8, and I'm going to read 8 and 9. It says, "For it is by grace you have been saved through faith, and this is not from yourselves. It is the gift of God, not by works, so that no one can boast." And so it's very clear. It's not by ourselves that we are saved. It's by grace, and none of us basically can boast. There's not hey, here's these superstar Christians who they're really saved, or they finally have achieved that salvation status. And then here's kind of these ones that they're really still working on it. It's kind of a yes or no. It's almost like a binary option in this sense that we're talking about. And either you have accepted Christ, it says in Romans, I can't remember the chapter, but if you confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised Him from the dead, then you will be saved. And so we have this confidence that if we have this faith in what Jesus did for us and receive that gift of grace so that we have a right standing with God, that's free. That's something we can't earn and don't earn. It's not that's not up for debate. That's clearly what the Bible shares. And so with that, it's a big mindset shift, especially again in our culture. And I know personally for myself, just with the way I kind of operate. And so any of you that have struggled with worthiness or shame or any of those types of things, and especially in a relationship with God, I want you to know that what God says is it's by His grace alone that you are actually saved. It's that's the only thing that can do it. And so if you feel like it's God's grace plus me not lying to someone, for a month, or if it's God's grace plus me not looking at, a girl at the gym and having, impure thoughts or something like that. I mean, there's just so many different ways that we can all struggle. Or me, seeing someone else doing well and then having these envious thoughts, oh man, they're doing well. I wish I had that success too, social media. Again, these are all things I imagine are pretty common for us still. Or even if something bigger, you have, an addiction of some sort, you struggle with alcohol use or even drugs. all these things, like God's grace is meant to enter into our lives in a way that despite these things, we are now saved. Now, the beautiful thing is God doesn't leave us where we're at. And so if we struggle with these things, like his goal is to have us in some way do some sort of like training almost in this area of our life. And that's kind of what in the next video I want to talk about is what does that look like? Like, yes, the faith is what saves us. We have that salvation, but then what's that next step? Because we do see in James, and I think this is what a lot of people say when it's like, well, what about James when he talks about how, faith without works is dead? But what James also says is that, the demons believe that, I think it says like God is one. I'm going to put the verse down here so I'll have it accurately. But like, what does that mean for them? It doesn't mean they're like going to heaven, right? Like, it's not just a head belief, but it's actually this heart belief. And so in some fashion, yes, there is like a formation that's going to happen in our lives and change us. And outwardly, we're going to see that, but it is a product of that grace that we receive. And so that, again, is going to be the next video. So not going to go too deep into that, but you might have that question. So with this, like where I kind of want to land, the last story I want to share for this one alone is, again, it's by this grace, like only what God did on the cross could save us. Otherwise, he wouldn't have needed to do that. And so that alone is where our faith is in that and who he is and what he did. And I had to be taught this lesson in kind of a silly way, but it makes sense. Like God invites us into his family, right? And kind of in a comical fashion, I can't go into the whole story just because it will take too much time. But basically God was like, Steve, like your sonness, or you being a son, in the family of God, does not depend on like how much of a son you are. Like you can't earn your sonness. It's actually based on me as your father. And because I'm your father, that's why you're my son. And I was like, oh, it kind of makes sense. And for some reason with grace, that's sort of how it is, right? Like it might be a little oversimplified, but basically it's this idea that if we receive God's grace, something we didn't do, we can't earn, like we're now considered sons or daughters of the Most High. And he's like, it's just like with your dad. He's like, Steve, your dad, like you're not his son because somehow you like finally achieved son status. I'm his son because my dad had me. And that's the only reason I'm his son. And in that case, it's kind of like a biological fact of some sort. But similar to like just how much of a fact or truth that is, the same is true with God. Like if we receive his grace and we accept that and we are now following after Christ, we're remaining in him, like we are sons and daughters of the Most High, and that can't be taken away. And we're still going to experience these hardships, and we're going to talk about that a little bit in this next video. But God is training us, maturing us, growing us more and more to walk in his likeness because he loves us so much. All right, I'm going to stop there because this video is getting longer. But love you guys. I hope this video really hit home for you. I know for me, again, this week, it's something I've had to remind myself of. And all right, well, we'll talk to you guys soon. Bye.